Paul, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me. Thanks, Phil.
And obviously, your background, for those that you haven't seen, you sort of, raked on the pitch and pitch side at Newcastle United. You're the head doctor at Newcastle United Football Club.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Yeah, I like to stay under the radar a little bit, really. But yeah, when I'm seen out and about, it's head of medical at Newcastle United. So I've been here a while now.
Great. Well, so Paul, could you tell us a little bit about your journey, how you've ended up at Newcastle, what you've gone through, any challenges you faced, and just a bit about yourself, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've got a brilliant job. I really enjoy it, and so much so that I've been here for 15 years. First got into sports medicine really when I was practicing training to become a doctor. And at that time, I worked at the World University Games with the Great Britain football team from the university, and that was, I think, 2002 in Izmir. And then one of the coaches for that team was actually an FA coach in the futsal program. The futsal program wasn't particularly well recognised at the time, and England didn't have a particularly good team. We kept getting thrashed everywhere, but it gave me a good grounding really in terms of team care and athlete care. And I really wanted to sort of combine my passions in life. So one of my passions was doing medicine, being a doctor, and the second one was sport, which I've always loved from a young age. Really, I'd like to be active and out and about and having a go at different things. And I basically tried to combine both of those things. So I did a diploma of sports and exercise medicine at Bath University many years ago. And then when I was doing A&E in the region, I got the offer to cover a Pontins reserve game at Newcastle, which was like the second or third team at the time. So I jumped at the opportunity, but it just left me wanting more. So a few more years passed. I became the academy doctor at Newcastle because I continued helping them out. And I was doing the academy 2-3 days a week. I then came in 2009, actually. I'd just come to the end of my training to become a consultant in emergency medicine. And I'd been working for a year at Carlisle Hospital, but commuting across from Newcastle. And I got a bit of a phone call out of the blue, really. It's when Alan Shearer first started in 2009. And he was going in for the last 7-8 games, from what I remember. And Paul Ferris, who was the physio that looked after Alan at the time, was coming in almost like a performance director. And I think they'd had, they wanted some new staff to come in with them. So he, I'll never forget it, he met me in the Corner House pub in Heaton, and we had a chat, and he basically said out the blue if I wanted to come and help them for the last 7-8 games of the season. I thought, wow, what an opportunity. So I did that basically. And that was a bit of a roller coaster, that last 7 or 8 games, but really felt part of a team. It's such a unique opportunity for me. And then the rest is history to a degree. Well, only in that Alan always reminds me that I got a contract out of that situation and he didn't. But yeah, good.
It's interesting you seeing that like feeling of the part of a team at that point, because a lot of people from the fans on the pitch side sort of like that's a period of time when Shearer was almost brought in too late, wasn't really able to have that much of an impact. But it's interesting that internally it really felt like that being part of a unit.
Yeah, definitely. I always take it that when managers come in, something's gone wrong at some point, and we all have to look at ourselves. It's normally the manager that carries the can, unfortunately. But I think we all have to look at ourselves as backroom staff and the players to say, well, something somewhere's not worked because success isn't happening, so we have to change something. And we have to be open to that change and be reflective personally as well. And he brought in a new way of doing things at that time with new people to try and freshen things up. But it was probably a little bit too late, in all honesty. Everyone tried the hardest, but didn't quite get there, although it was very close.
Yeah. And so from that time, because obviously there's a lot happened since Shearer in charge then, what other experiences have stood out in that since then?
Yeah, I think the main thing for me is the constant change in football and elite sports, and then the sort of need for immediate success. And all time frames go out the window, really, and expectations are that everything needs done immediately. Scans need done immediately. Results need communicating immediately. The player needs to be back immediately. And it's trying to carry the weight of those expectations and actually say to people, just a second, we need to stop and think for a moment. But it's the fact that really I think I've had 10 managers now, and that includes some of the temporary ones. But I look at it at seeing 10 different cultures and 10 different ways of doing things and 10 different new ways and new ideas, and trying to take on something positive from each of those managers that I've worked with to take forward in my own career. And it's having that flexibility to adapt in this situation, and not just, I've got my own principles and I've got my own way of doing things, but you have got to be flexible and open and honest and reflective, really, to actually survive in this environment long term. And that's something that I've developed over the years, really. When I first started, Derek Wright was the physio who left a couple of years ago, and he'd been here for 38 years by the time he left, which is obviously an unbelievable time. And that's, I use that wealth of experience that he had. So I just attached myself to Derek for the first period, just to see how he interacted with the players, with the management, how he examined things, and how the physios examine things is very, very different and much more depth than a doctor normally would coming from a hospital environment. So it's just learning the softer skills and also the examination skills, and having that ability to adapt over time to each of those new cultures that comes through.
And how much you see the softer skills there? How much do you find? Because I'm assuming that when you're seeing the players, very much when they're on the treatment table and there's something that needs addressing, how much do you have to spend with the mindset of the players as well as the actual physical injuries? Do you have any input there?
Yeah, no, absolutely, massively. So for me, the medicine's the easy bits. It's the man management and the communication around that, which is the more tricky element sometimes, because the same injury might happen to different players, but how they respond to it and how you get them through the rehab process can be completely different. So you need to have a large degree of emotional intelligence, really, just to read the situation. Obviously, if it's a longer term injury, the player's going to be absolutely devastated. And then there's a certain way in which you want to talk to them at the start and develop that and set them goals that they can tick off the list. But also, if there's something that you don't think is too major, but the player's feeling it and you need to trying to get them available for the team, then you need to be a bit more bullish with them, a bit more confident. And they can try and reflect off you sometimes. Okay, if Paul thinks it's not too bad and I trust Paul, then yeah, let's give this a go. Let's try and go outside and see how it feels and push myself on the pitch. Or also the respect and trust. Okay, if I'm being told by the medical team that it's something a bit more serious and I need to be careful, then I'll take that on board as well, really. But the mindset of the elite athlete is definitely key. And I think it's having that respect about the individuality of it all, and knowing that everyone's going to be different, and treating them as different. And I do it naturally anyway, I think, but it's not making them feel like they're the most important person, but they are at that moment. But you're fully invested in their rehab program, in their diagnosis. They've got to have complete faith that you've got the right diagnosis, the right treatment path. Because if they're not on board with it from the start, then you're in a hiding to nothing, really.
Yeah, you've got to have that. You've got to have that trust, or them have that trust and faith in you, haven't you, for them to get behind you. And completely agree that point of everyone's different, and you've got to treat everyone as being different. It's something that we see very much when we deal with people. You have to, like, people are individuals, and you got to treat them as such, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. See, when it's a team sport, but it is 11 different individuals, without being too cliched about it. And we try and do things on a team level, but also as an individual level. And the amount of detail, even like this morning that we've been discussing before the match tomorrow, it's really taking to that individual element and giving them exactly what they need as a specific individual for that position. So a 34-year-old right back compared to a 20-year-old striker, they've got very different individual needs. They've got different backgrounds where they've come from. They're at different parts of their career. They've got different injury histories. They've got different outlook. They've got different experiences with medical teams and coaching staff. So it's really trying to read the situation and work out what that player needs at that moment in time.
Yeah. Are there any key attributes that you see in, yes, to sort of get the, I mean, anybody that's coming in and saying you at a successful level anyway, but like, any key attributes that take them on to the greater levels of success?
Yeah, I think, well, for me, it's the hard work of the individual, really. They've all got to a certain skill level to get to this point. Then for me, they can develop technically, obviously, while they're here, and the current manager is very good at developing individuals technically and making that effort as well. But if they don't have the right attitude and they don't have the right ethos about working hard, and they're not able to control their own mind and have that focus, then they're not going to be ultimately successful. And I think if you've got a combination of unbelievable talent plus fantastic attitude and very hard-working ethos, then you're a long way to being a very successful player and elite athlete, really. And it's the ones that we can help on that journey, and the ones that are really ultra focused and nothing will get in their path. They're quite blinkered thinking in terms of, right, I'm going to get to this, but there's one specific player at the moment, very blinkered to get to that one point. Everything he does in his life, from his car to his bed to his attitude in training to turning up on time for blood tests to being respectful around the environment, everything that he does is built to try and make him successful as an individual. And some people don't have every single attribute of their life, because it is difficult to do, focused on that specific endpoint.
And again, going back to the fact that some of the different experiences you've had, obviously there's a key from a Newcastle fan, there's a huge point that you spanned your time there was the change in ownership.
Yeah.
Was there any particular shifts there that you're able to share that you felt around the culture of the club, or just anything in general, really?
Yeah, I mean, we worked as a very small group of staff up until that point of takeover, and we covered many different roles, not just myself, but in every facet of the football club. And we've had huge staff growth since then, and we've had huge expectation since then. And that's been the club's very different to when I was to the 12, 13 years previous, where we relegated twice, and we were in around the bottom of the league, and that's a horrible pressure and horrible feeling to get relegated. But obviously we had the highs of then getting promoted in the championship and coming back up. But now the expectation is to try and win trophies and maintain ourselves in the top 6 in the next 5 years. And that's a completely different pressure and expectation. So that's one point, is the expectation. 2 is the growth in the number of staff, which is excellent. But I do think comes to a tipping point sometimes where you as a staff group have to pull up the drawbridge a little bit. And the staff have heard me speak about this. Pull up that drawbridge, right, this is what we've got, this is our new team, this is the way we're going to work. We need to nail down our processes, nail down our focus and expectations in the next 6 months, 12 months. What are we going to go for this season? And then get on with it, because if you keep growing and growing and growing and growing all the time, it makes it very difficult to actually embed your processes and give that effective treatment. So I think the expectations and the massive staff growth are the things that have changed for me. I always reflect really in terms of, okay, so 5 years ago, 7 years ago, what's different, what's changed for the better, what's changed for the worse. Generally, obviously everything's much improved, but that's not being disrespectful to what went before, because honestly, we got a hell of a lot out of a relatively small amount of staff and input at that time. And I remember when we finished 5th one year under Alan Pardew, and we were one place, obviously, and I think a couple of points off the Champions League. On what we were doing with the number of staff and the budget was unbelievable at that point. But the expectations are just different now. The caliber of player coming through is probably the next level again, and it's trying to take everything to the next level as quickly as possible.
What would you say in doing that? What would you say the greatest challenges are that you're going to have to face over the next few years?
I think any organisation that grows that quickly has got the challenge really of actually setting a strategy and a roadmap and about, okay, I ask when I do appraisals with the staff, right, where do you want to be in 12 months? Where do you want to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years time? It gives me a better understanding of that individual, but also we need, right, we've set our vision, we've set our departmental plans about how we're going to get there in 5 years' time, and it's our job to carry it out. But the challenge really is mapping that out, I think, in terms of how you want to get there and how you're going to do it, and holding yourself accountable along that process, really, and reflecting, right, okay, I said I was going to do this season. Have we done those things? And if we haven't, then why haven't we? And if we have done those things, then well done. What can we move on to next? But it's that strategy and roadmap, really, I think are the biggest challenge at the moment.
Yeah, great. Yeah. See, and it is something that, obviously you touched on earlier, that especially, sport in general, but is under a spotlight, but especially, you guys operating in, the Premier League Football Club, there's a lot of eyes on you, and it's a lot of needing things to happen quickly and instantaneously. That's in business, people, well, the vast majority of businesses get on with it, and it's only if something major happens that all eyes turn to them. But you guys, you're operating under that week in, week out, and you have to deliver on the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, the external scrutiny is an interesting thing, and that can be even if the game's on television to what you're doing on the pitch with the player, and everyone sees it now immediately. Everyone comments, were they knocked out? Is it concussion? How did they examine the knee? You get that immediate scrutiny. And then also, obviously, the scrutiny of the number of injuries you have, or the perception externally about what's actually happening. I'm not saying this in a defensive way, but sometimes the external perceptions are not the actual reality. And the confidential nature of the business and the work, and certainly in the medical arenas, you can't go out and necessarily put a page in the program about, like, these are the injuries, this is why this has happened. Some clubs do that to a degree, but it's trying to be a little bit immune to that. I fundamentally believe in the staff that I look after as well, that everyone's trying to do the job to the best of their abilities, in the best interest of the players, to give the manager the best availability possible for him to choose on a Saturday. But the external scrutiny, you obviously are aware of it, but I don't take any of it to heart, and I don't read too much about it, or I don't put myself out there in social media or anything like that. But there is that undercurrent sometimes, well, this is being said or that's being said, and that's how you're doing it. But if you firmly believe in your roadmap and the way in which you operate as an individual, as a professional, then I think that's all you can ask of people.
To be honest with you, an example of that sort of stood out for me was, I can't remember, was it? It might have been 3 years ago now, but there was a player, and I can't really remember who. And you'd come onto the pitch, and they had concussion, and I think there was 55,000 people in the stadium, and everybody else at home wanting them back on the pitch, but you stood by your rules and was like, no, that's not the right thing to do for in the moment. And I'm like, I think probably after that event, it was probably a couple of years till I next spoke to you, so we don't see each other. But I felt an element of pride that somebody had that stood up for what was right in that way under a hell of a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It was a few years ago. It was Alex Mitrovic at the end, and we were playing Sunderland actually at St James's Park, and it was the last couple of minutes, and he was obviously a striker that might have got us a goal to actually try and win the game, but he had loss of consciousness, and that's a red flag to us in the medical world, and they have to come off. The player didn't want to, so I almost took the opinion, right, that one weren't trained for these situations, that you have to take the decision out of the player's hands because they might be under a concussive element. And then remember speaking to Rafa on the sideline, and to be fair, the key thing for me was that Rafa supported me, so I'd already engendered that trust with working with Rafa for a period of time, and he then trusted me. Right, Paul's making a decision. under a difficult situation, and I'm going to back him at that moment in time, and he did. So that was key to that process, really. But again, it goes back to trying to do the right thing at the time in the players' or patients' best interests. And I think sometimes my emergency medicine training helps in that, because you plan for the worst case scenario. Very much like the aviation industry, you fall back on procedures when there are difficult moments. And we do life support courses, and a specific course for the Premier League called ATMIF now, that you know exactly when you go onto the field of play in terms of assessing the airway, then the breathing and the circulation, whilst in cardiac arrest, but also in other emergency situations. And you obviously also learn what the important things to pick up in concussion as well. So there are some things that your training prepares you for, really, and you go into autopilot during those situations, and you can fall back on those systems that you've learned in difficult moments when you're under quite large external scrutiny, shall we say.
Yeah, so the pressure must have been unbelievable on that moment, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
But it's funny because one of the guys, that's part of the teams does emergency action planning, and like globally, he's a massive leader in that. And that's one of the areas that we're going to put some materials out on. As a leader, are you prepared for when things go wrong? Are you prepared for the emergency situation so that when they arise, everything kicks in and you actually and you're the calm, you're the calm head. That's because you've gone through what you're going to have to do when you face that, as opposed to suddenly not having prepared for it and you're panicking, and so that therefore so does everyone else.
Yeah, you don't think some of these eventualities are going to happen, but when they do, they might be infrequent, few and far between, but you're sure going to need to know what to do in that situation. And if there can be a tendency sometimes to submit to the pressure, then you need a fallback procedure to go to. So emergency action planning is a really important part of our work at the moment, because we're working across split sites as well. So the women's team, academy, the stadium, and the training ground. So if you call 999 and ask for the ambulance and describe what the situation is, the response prior to the ambulance getting there and when the ambulance gets there is going to be different on each site, and you have to make sure that each of the people that work at those sites know exactly what's happening, and trying to standardize that process and emergency action plan for your business, for your organization across the different sites is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So are there any other things that in your in your journey, in your experiences, that you think would be really interesting to share?
I think, I don't know, I think trying to bring together some of the experience that I've taken from the emergency medicine department to elite sports sometimes as well. So I was told very clearly I remember being at Newcastle General Hospital, and when we as junior doctors used to have to present patient histories and examinations to the senior consultants at the time. And it just led to a really important message, which is just to make a decision sometimes. And you can use evidence to make that decision, and can, as we said previously in the talk, make that decision in the best interest of the person, but just make a decision sometimes. So the worst thing you can do is just regurgitate what's been said or what you've found, but you've got to formulate an idea in your own head and commit to something. And if you work in a psychologically safe environment or in that team structure, then it's okay to make mistakes sometimes. But at least you've fought to have a pathway to do something and make a decision about a treatment plan or rehab route or something like that. So that's really important to me. And also, I think I'm 48 now, but the longer you become in terms of what are your priorities in life sometimes, really, and this is a bit more wider than what we were talking about, just work. So if your priorities are your family and life at different stages in life, do you actually truly prioritize that? If you're at an earlier stage in your career and you want to prioritize work, which is absolutely fine as well, then is everything that you're doing being geared up to that at that moment in time, really? And I think it's just we're taught as doctors now, and I think everybody is sort of to be quite reflective at moments. So we do yearly appraisals, and we have to have reflective documents about cases that have gone well or cases that have gone badly. And it's only in that moment where you take a step back, sometimes out of the heat of the kitchen, so to speak, where you actually do some of your important learnings and look back on those episodes. How did you handle it? Could you change the way you did it next time or not? So being reflective is important on that journey as well for me. And trying to think what the other important things are along the route. I think sort of the leadership and mentoring side of things is important to me now, and I've almost got to a stage in my career where I want to give something back. So I go back to the medical school where I first qualified to try and lecture on some of the courses there at the moment. But it's also important to be in that leadership role, and I want to help people come through. So other doctors that were similar to myself 10, 15 years ago, and actually draw on my years of experience to help them in similar situations. Not to say that they've got to do everything like I did it, but just try and help them on that journey so they can forge their own path and minimize the number of mistakes, I suppose, because you are going to make mistakes along the way. But I really believe it's how you respond to these incidents. We're not human if we don't make those mistakes. And as I said before, you've got to work in an environment and with a team that accepts that. And as long as they do, then that's the only way in which you're going to grow and flourish as a department or as a staff, really, sometimes. So that leadership and mentoring and appraisal is really important at my stage of the career currently, and something I want to keep developing.
It's interesting you see that, because it is something that we do see in people as when you get in stages where there's a lot of value to you as an individual in giving back to others and helping people along the way. And we do see that, a common thread of just how much that gives people, being able to help and assist in that way.
Yeah, no, definitely. And someone taught me an important point a year or two ago, as we mentioned before, about staff growth, but you can't be afraid to employ people that are better than you in your role. So don't be insecure in your own role. And if I want this medical department of Newcastle United is not about Paul Catterson. It's about getting the quality of individual coming through. So I've got a future plan for, I don't know, 1 year's time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time, whatever it may be, that I'm not doing this role, that somebody else has got to come through. And you can't just pick those people off the shelf sometimes. So it's really important to try and identify and future plan those people that are coming through the organisation internally, or it might be external to the organisation. But you've got to have an idea about where that future's taking you. And I think sometimes in elite sports, everything's quite reactive and in the moment and all about the 3 points tomorrow. But actually, it is very much so. But it's also about, okay, how are we going to improve as a group? How are we going to grow? How are we going to grow the people within the organisation and the team? You're here because you see potential in you, because you're a great physio, because you're a great soft tissue therapist, you're a great chiropractor. But how can we help better you as a person whilst you're with us as well, really? And that gives mutual benefit then. It's beneficial to the organisation, but it's beneficial to the individual on their life journey as well and their work journey.
Yeah, I think actually, I know we're sort of towards the end, but just one thing you said there that did highlight something to me that I'd like to ask is, obviously different managers come in and things can change sort of like, quite a bit. Your long-term planning and with the background of the club, how much influence can a new manager come in to disrupt that long-term planning?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topical question at the moment, really, because there are some clubs not too far from me, I suppose, which have a very fixed model way of doing things. And for example, if a new manager came in, that they would only be able to bring in one coach with them, but all the other staff at the club, which underpin the daily workings, remain a constant. Some of the top 6 clubs in the Premier League, then they have some quite big characters that come in as managers, and they'll have their own teams, their own blueprints of success that they want to use when they come in, and they'll demand certain things when they enter the environment. But everybody tries to get a Newcastle United identity and way of working And that structure and way of working really is set by the sporting director, the performance director, the chief executive even. And then you're almost bringing that manager into that Newcastle United identity, using his skill set, and then taking the team forward, as well as the backroom staff who have a relatively constant, structured way of doing things. Of course, there'll be changes in the league sport. There always are. But it's really important, that word identity, and it's something that we're trying to develop at the football club as well, because we are unique, and we have to draw on the unique passion of the Northeast, the one club city, the incredible hard work of people who work incessantly just to be able to afford to come to the football sometimes. And it's recognizing that identity of the Northeast and trying to reflect it on and off the pitch at Newcastle that we're trying really importantly to take forward.
Well, that's good to know that there's that sort of stability there.
Yeah.
Well, like, honestly, Paul, I've really enjoyed that. It's gone over really quickly, and the time. I think people love listening to it as well.
Okay.
So thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, no, it's all right. No, thank you for inviting me on, and just discussing those things. It's especially on moments like this. It's only when you sit back and reflect and actually think, well, actually, it's been a great journey, and I'm really lucky to do what I'm doing, and it just gives you that sort of positive affirmation about an enthusiasm for going forward and to have more success.
Good. Well, it'll be an extra spring step when you next time you run. Well, let's hope you're not run on the pitch. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. No, thanks, Phil. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks a lot.
Good man. Cheers.
Cheers.